Hello. Get comfortable, and let me tell you a story. In this video, we'll talk about the indigenous peoples who lived on the territory of Ukraine in ancient times, and about Kyivan Rus, one of the most powerful states of its era. But first, subscribe to the channel. Your support helps it grow. The territory of present-day Ukraine began to be settled by early humans deep in prehistory. The earliest traces date back to around 1 million years BCE. From that time on, the land was never completely abandoned. Not even during the greatest southward advances of the glaciers. This region belongs to the earliest centers of civilization and urban development. It lies within the original area where the horse was domesticated. The wheel was invented, and the first metals were mastered by humankind. Multiple waves of Indo-European migrations into Europe, and later movements in the opposite direction, laid the foundation for the region's diverse population. The division of the land into major natural zones, forest and steppe, shaped different forms of economy. It also determined the character of later historical processes. The Ukrainian steppe was always an integral part of wider Eurasian historical and migration patterns. Within the Great Steppe, Greek colonization of the Black Sea coast brought the territory of Ukraine into the orbit of ancient civilization as its northern frontier. As a result of the Great Migration period in the first half of the first millennium CE, Slavic tribes settled across the territory of Ukraine. The first humans appeared on the territory of modern Ukraine during the early Paleolithic, in the so-called Acheulean period, more than 900 to 800,000 years ago. The oldest known prehistoric site in Ukraine is Korolevo 1, located in Transcarpathia. Its age reaches up to 1 million years. Dating back to the Guns glaciation. Upper layers from the late Paleolithic show traces of Acheulean and Mousterian cultures. The final Paleolithic settlement here existed at the beginning of the Worm glaciation, around 50,000 years ago. Settlement spread from west to east in several waves, and continued until about 100,000 years ago. Stone tools attributed by archaeologists to Homo erectus have been found not only in Transcarpathia, but also in the Dniester region, Zhytomyr area, Donbass, and Crimea. However, no fossil human remains of Homo erectus have been discovered in Ukraine. Human evolution unfolded under conditions of repeated glaciations. Guns, Mindel, Rus, and Worm. These glacial cycles shaped Ukraine's natural zones: tundra, forest steppe, and steppe. During the Middle Paleolithic, the Mousterian period, from about 100 to 35,000 years ago, the territory of Ukraine was inhabited by Neanderthals. Researchers have identified more than 300 Neanderthal sites and burials. Most are located in mountainous regions of Transcarpathia, Precarpatia, the Dnipro Rapids area, and in caves of eastern Crimea, including Kikoba, Prolomai, Barankaya III, and Wolf Grotto. At the Molodov site on the Dniester River, a mammoth shoulder blade decorated with engravings was discovered. Modern humans Homo sapiens sapiens, also known as Cro-Magnons, emerged during the Upper Paleolithic, more than 40 to 35,000 years ago. In Ukraine, they belonged to the Caucasoid population and gradually replaced the Neanderthals. Cro-Magnons lived in hunter-gatherer societies with simple clan-based social organization. Archaeologists have identified about 800 Cro-Magnon sites in Ukraine. They are grouped into Transcarpathian, Dniester, Volhynian, Middle Dnieper, and steppe traditions. In eastern Ukraine, one of the most remarkable Upper Paleolithic monuments is Kamiana Mohyla. Its earliest petroglyphs date back to this period. For Cro-Magnons of the steppe zone, this site served as a sacred center. Well-known late Paleolithic sites include Mizin on the Desna River, Mezhyrek in the Cherkasy region, and the Kirillivska site within modern Kyiv. During this time, humans learned to use natural sources of fire, and later to produce it themselves. They made clothing, built artificial dwellings, and relied on hunting and gathering. The foundations of modern social organization were formed. The first belief systems emerged, along with early art. The Mesolithic period coincided with the melting of the glaciers and the beginning of the Holocene epoch. Climate warming led to population growth. This was the peak of hunting-based economies. The extinction of Ice Age fauna, caused by climate change and human activity, led to a crisis of Paleolithic hunting methods. During this period, humans domesticated the dog, invented the bow, and developed fishing tools. Collective hunting was gradually replaced by individual hunting. Ways of life became more individualized. Families separated from extended clans. Nomadic lifestyles slowly shifted towards settled communities. The first territorial communities emerged. Average life expectancy increased from about 20 to 25 years to around 35 years. More than 300 Mesolithic sites have been identified in Ukraine. They are divided into Southern Steppe and Paleolithic Forest Steppe cultural zones. The crisis of Mesolithic subsistence economies gradually pushed societies toward food production. Between 8 and 6,000 years ago, the Neolithic Revolution took place. This term was introduced by Gordon Childe. Human societies shifted from hunting and gathering to agriculture and animal husbandry. People adopted settled lifestyles, invented pottery, and began farming and herding domesticated animals. Uneven geographic conditions led to regional specialization and the growth of trade. Craft production emerged, including weaving, and a class of organizers gradually formed, eventually giving rise to early elites. Ukraine's division into forest steppe, and steppe zones stabilized. A fertile humus soil layer developed. Neolithic cultures in Ukraine were influenced by innovations from the Near East, transmitted mainly through the Balkans and the Danube region. The Dniester culture belongs to this period. The Neolithic, or Copper Age. From about 7 to 5,000 years ago, introduced copper tools. Economic specialization intensified. Pastoralism dominated the steppe. Farming prevailed in the forest steppe, and hunting remained important in forest zones. This era saw the rise of major agricultural cultures. Above all, the Trypillia culture, dating from the 6th to the 3rd millennium BCE. Trypillian proto-cities housed up to 10 to 15,000 inhabitants. They featured concentric layouts and two-story buildings. The Trypillians used pottery kilns and developed their own symbolic system, bringing them close to forming a full civilization. However, extensive farming practices eventually weakened their society. The Bronze Age. From the 3rd millennium to the 12th century BCE, was marked by the spread of bronze tools and weapons. Climate aridization stimulated technological development. Steppe tribes turned to nomadic pastoralism, while forest steppe communities expanded plow agriculture. Social inequality increased. After the decline of the Trypillia culture, pastoral societies consolidated, and the Yamnaya culture emerged, often associated with early Indo-Europeans. By the 12th to 10th centuries BCE, the territory of Ukraine remained divided among several cultural communities. Proto-Slavs inhabited the western forests. Proto-Finno-Ugric groups lived in the east. Thracian Illyrian tribes occupied the forest steppe, and North Iranian peoples dominated the steppe. The Cimmerians were the earliest people known to have lived on the territory of modern Ukraine, whose name was recorded in written sources and preserved to this day. They were pastoral tribes who inhabited the steppe and forest steppe zones and belonged to the Iranian-speaking world. The Cimmerians were the first to introduce iron weapons to this region, iron swords with bronze-decorated hilts, marking the beginning of a new era, the Iron Age. Like other Iranian peoples, they buried their dead in burial mounds, known as kurgans. In Homer's Odyssey, the Cimmerians are mentioned under the name Hippomalgi, meaning mere milkers, those who drank fermented horse milk. They are also described by other classical authors, including Herodotus, Callimachus, and Strabo. Assyrian cuneiform sources refer to them as Gamera. The Cimmerians occupied vast territories between the Dniester and the Don rivers, as well as the Crimean Peninsula, where they built fortified settlements. Around 1250 BCE, they founded what is considered the first known port city on the territory of present-day Ukraine. Their primary occupation was warfare. Scholars believe the Cimmerians were a branch of ancient Iranian nomadic peoples, genetically close to the Scythians. Their material culture survives in bone ornaments, weapons, bows, daggers, swords, and war hammers, and burial sites marked with stone stelae. In the 7th century BCE, the Scythians, another Iranian-speaking group from Central Asia, displaced the Cimmerians from the steppe. They were nomadic pastoralists and skilled warriors. In Crimea, the Scythians peacefully assimilated with the Taurians, who had lived there since the 1st millennium BCE and practiced animal husbandry, agriculture, and fishing. through close trade and cultural ties with Greek colonists of the northern Black Sea coast. Scythian culture, mythology, and customs were thoroughly described by ancient authors, most notably by Herodotus, a contemporary of the Scythians. A defining feature of Scythian art was the animal style, exemplified by the famous pectoral from Tavsta-Mohyla. Numerous Scythian burial mounds are known in northern Crimea and the lower Dnipro region, including Saloka. Scholars distinguish between agricultural Scythians in the north and nomadic Scythians in the south. Among the southern groups were the so-called royal Scythians, who ruled over others and collected tribute. Under Greek influence, they gradually adopted a settled way of life, centered around Neapolis Scythian, forming the first known Scythian state, often referred to as the Kingdom of Aetius. In 513 BCE, the Persian king Darius I launched an unsuccessful military campaign against Scythia. Instead of submitting, the Scythians sent him symbolic gifts: a bird, a frog, a mouse, and 5 arrows. In the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, the Scythians were gradually pushed westward by other Iranian nomadic tribes, the Sarmatians, also known as the Sarmatians. They were renowned for their physical strength and warrior culture. Like earlier catacomb culture peoples and later the Alans, the Sarmatians practiced artificial cranial deformation. Their heavily armored cavalry was highly valued by the Roman army across the empire. Women, often identified with the Amazons, played a significant role in Sarmatian society. Sarmatian material culture was poorer than that of the Scythians. However, their jewelry, especially fibulae, also featured animal-style motifs, distinguished by abundant use of precious stones such as turquoise and red gemstones. From the 4th century CE onward, after the capital of the Roman Empire was moved to Constantinople, and following the division of the empire into western and eastern parts, the territory of modern Ukraine increasingly came under the cultural influence of the Byzantine Empire. In the 8th century BCE, ancient Greece experienced a demographic explosion. A shortage of fertile land triggered large-scale migration and the Greek colonization of the Mediterranean world. As the ancient Roman historian Plutarch wrote, the Greeks settled along the shores of the Mediterranean like frogs around the edge of a pond. This process also reached the northern coast of the Black Sea. Colonization strengthened the independence of individual communities and offered an alternative to royal tyranny within the city-states, accelerating the transition toward democratic forms of governance. The 6th century BCE marks the founding of the first Greek settlement on Berezan Island, at the mouth of the Dnipro River, known as Borysthenes. Over time, other Greek city-states emerged in southern Ukraine. Tyrus and Nikonion on the Dniester River. Olbia, an Ionian city on the southern Bug. Chersonesus, a Dorian polis near present-day Sevastopol. Panticapaeum near modern Kerch, as well as Theodosia and Tanais at the mouth of the Don River. The economy of these ancient Greek polis was based on advanced craftsmanship, agriculture, particularly wheat and grapes, and trade with local populations. Grain, wine, fish sauce known as garum, as well as furs, honey, and livestock were exported to the mother cities. The polis practiced a form of slave-owning democracy. Political power belonged to citizens, the demos, who defended their communities with weapons in hand and made collective decisions through voting in public assemblies held in agoras. Alongside citizens, the cities were inhabited by enslaved people with no rights, resident foreigners engaged mainly in trade, known as metics, and other non-Greek outsiders, called xeni. The primary sources of enslaved labor were war captives, birth from enslaved women, or purchase at slave markets. Greek colonies consisted of the urban polis and its surrounding agricultural districts. The cities were equipped with water supply and drainage systems, supported active crafts and trade, and minted their own coinage. Descendants of the ancient Greeks continued to live in Crimea until the late 18th century, when, by order of Catherine II, they were forcibly resettled to the Azov region. In the 5th century BCE, a powerful centralized state emerged along the shores of the Kerch Strait, between the Crimean and Taman peninsulas, the Bosporan Kingdom. Initially, it was a federation of city-states, including Theodosia and Phanagoria, with its capital in Panticapaeum. Over time, this alliance evolved into an absolute monarchy. The kingdom's economy relied on agriculture and trade with Athens, exporting up to 5 million poods of grain annually. For centuries, the Bosporan kingdom resisted Roman expansion to the northeast. Its last ruler, Mithridates VI Eupator, was ultimately defeated in the 1st century BCE and took his own life. As a result, the northern Black Sea region came under the influence of the Roman Empire. Although the empire's formal borders ran along the Danube-Dniester line and the Caucasus Mountains, Roman garrisons were stationed in only a few Crimean cities. Ancient Greek culture brought classical architecture, art, education, and advanced science, especially medicine, to the northern Black Sea region. It also introduced viticulture and winemaking. The long-term consequences of Greek colonization included the spread of democratic governance, advances in agriculture and craftsmanship, urbanization, the introduction of coinage, and the establishment of a southern, Mediterranean-oriented civilizational vector for the region. After the division of the Roman Empire into western and eastern parts, the Byzantine period began in the history of the northern Black Sea region. By the mid-3rd century CE, Scandinavian Gothic tribes migrated from the Vistula River basin, associated with the wheelbark culture, into the lands of the middle and lower Dnipro. They called their new homeland Oyam. Military skill and strong chieftain-based organization allowed the Goths, under the rule of Ermanaric, to subjugate vast territories across Eastern Europe. They subdued the local agricultural population of the forested Dnipro region, an episode remembered in legend as the execution of the Ontes leader Bos, forcing them northward. The Goths also expelled Iranian Sarmatian tribes from the steppe and conquered Crimea. These conquests led to the creation of a Gothic kingdom, described in Getica by the Roman historian Jordanes. Its capital was Damperstadt, likely located near the modern village of Bashmaka in today's Dnipropetrovsk region. Some scholars believe the Goths also contributed to the formation of the Chernyakhov archaeological culture, which existed from the late 2nd to the mid-5th century CE, one of the most significant phenomena of pre-literate history in Ukraine. Today, around 5,000 Chernyakhov sites are known, mostly settlements, covering a large part of modern Ukraine. It was during this period that the potter's wheel and iron plowshares were first widely used in the region. Glassmaking was introduced, metallurgy expanded, and ironworking crafts reached a high level of development. Gothic dominance in the Dnipro region ended in 375 CE, when a coalition of nomadic Asian tribes, the Huns, led by Balamber, defeated them and forced their westward migration. This marked one of the earliest stages of the Great Migration period. Soon afterward, the Huns established a powerful state between the Don River and the Carpathian Mountains, led by Attila, who died in 453 CE. After several defeats by Roman forces and their allies, the Hunnic state rapidly declined and disintegrated. These upheavals allowed the descendants of the Kyiv culture, formed on the basis of the late Zarabintsy culture and previously pushed north by the Goths, to re-emerge on the historical stage. They resumed the southward expansion of the early Slavs, associated with the Kalakan and Pankivka cultures, into the forest steppe and steppe zones. The Slavs crossed the Carpathians and the Danube, entering Pannonia and the Byzantine Empire. Taking advantage of the demographic collapse caused by the Justinianic plague in the 6th century, Slavic populations settled the largely depopulated Balkans. They became the dominant ethnocultural force in the region for the next 1500 years. After the Huns, new waves of nomadic tribes continued to arrive in the northern Black Sea region. In the 6th century, the Avars appeared but soon moved on toward Pannonia. They were followed by the Bulgars, who in the 7th century established a nomadic state on the right bank of the Dnipro, Great Bulgaria, which existed from 632 to 668 CE. This state collapsed shortly after the death of its founder, Kubrat. Under pressure from newly arrived Khazars, the Bulgars split. One group, led by Asparuh, migrated to the territory of modern Bulgaria, where they founded the First Bulgarian Empire. For a time, this state controlled the lower reaches of the Dniester and the Danube. In the 7th and 8th centuries, the Khazars subdued the remnants of earlier nomadic groups, some of which had already begun to settle, and formed their own state, the Khazar Khaganate. Archaeologically, it is associated with the Saltovo-Mayaki culture, stretching from the Dnipro to the Volga. The Khazar Khaganate controlled a key steppe branch of the Silk Road connecting China and Byzantium. It grew strong enough to temporarily halt further nomadic migrations and to impose tribute on several Slavic tribes. The original homeland of the Slavs does not have a universally accepted location. The earliest references to the Slavs appear in Roman sources of the 1st and 2nd centuries CE. They are mentioned by Pliny the Elder, Tacitus, and Ptolemy. Where the Slavs are identified under the names Veneti or Veneti. The ethnonym Sklavini was first used by Byzantine authors. The historian Jordanes reports that by the 6th century the Slavs were already divided into 3 main branches. The Veneti, living north and east of the Vistula River and the Carpathians. The Ontes, inhabiting the lands between the Dniester and the Dnipro. And the Sklavini, settled in the lower Danube region. Most scholars see the dispersal of these groups as the beginning of the formation of distinct Slavic peoples, including the Ukrainian people. Later, the Slavs were described in greater detail by the Byzantine historian Procopius of Caesarea in his trilogy The Wars, written during the reign of Emperor Justinian I, between 527 and 565. This was a time when Slavic tribes, pressured from the north by the Great Migration, moved into the Balkans, regions largely depopulated by the Justinianic plague. Between the 5th and 7th centuries, local cultural regions formed in the territories of the Sclavini and the Ontes. Over time, these regions crystallized into unions of local Slavic tribes. On the territory of present-day Ukraine, these tribal unions included the Polians, centered in Kyiv; the Cimmerians, with their center in Chernihiv; the Drevlians, in the area of modern Zhytomyr; the Delibes and Buzans, in the upper Dniester and the western Bug Basin; the Ulichs, in the southern Bug, Dniester interfluve; the Tiverians, between the Dniester and the Prut; and the White Croats, also known as the Kharutans, in the Carpathian foothills. Across the Eastern European plain lived other Slavic tribes as well. The Dregoviches, Radomiks, Viatiks, Kriviches, and the Ilmen Slavs of Novgorod. The economic foundation of the East Slavic tribes was communal land ownership. Over time, tools, products, and property were gradually divided among individual families. A defining feature of their social organization was the rural community, an association of independent households. The Slavs lived a sedentary lifestyle. Plow-based agriculture formed the backbone of their economy. They cultivated wheat, rye, millet, barley, and turnips. Grain was first ground on hand mills, and later on rotary querns. Animal husbandry was also widespread. They mainly raised cattle, pigs, sheep, and goats. Fishing played a lesser role, while hunting was practiced primarily for valuable furs. In religious belief, a nature-centered worldview emerged, led by the cult of Purin. Leadership among the Slavs took the form of chieftainship. The chieftain was an elected position, based on personal qualities and proven deeds. By the 9th century, elected leaders were gradually replaced by an aristocracy, and positions of power became hereditary. As a response to the usurpation of authority by tribal elites and to internal conflicts within the aristocracy, an alternative solution emerged: the invitation of external military leaders. Kyivan Rus, formation in early history. The first reliable mention of the Rus dates back to 839, in the Frankish chronicle known as the Annals of Bertan. It records that the delegates arriving from the north to the Byzantine Empire identified themselves as Rus. The Rus made their presence felt again in 860, when they launched a naval expedition against Constantinople. They raided the outskirts of the Byzantine capital and returned without hindrance, as described by Greek eyewitnesses. The oldest source on the history of the Middle Dnipro region, written no earlier than the 11th century, the Primary Chronicle, narrates this expedition in its legendary section. It describes the establishment of a state with Kyiv as its capital in the early 9th century. According to the chronicle, the leaders of the expedition were Askold and Dir, who were said to be warriors from the Scandinavian Rurikid dynasty. Later, Oleg the Prophet, a member of this dynasty, supposedly arrived in Kyiv from Novgorod in 882, killed Askold and Dir, and took control of the city. Modern historians consider many of these accounts highly dubious, pointing out chronological errors and inconsistencies with archaeological evidence, which shows that Novgorod only emerged in the 10th century. State formation in the Middle Dnipro region is linked to the emergence of the trade route from the Varangians to the Greeks. A significant part of this route followed the Dnipro River, and Kyiv became an important transit point. It allowed the control of trade along the Dnipro, Pripyat, and Desna rivers, and provided a stopover for Scandinavian travelers to restock supplies. By the late 9th century, a new tribal union began forming around Kyiv under the leadership of the Varangians, with the Polians at its core. The Rus-Byzantine Treaty of 911 confirms the existence of a Varangian state along the Dnipro. From the early 10th century, the first historically attested ruler of Kyiv is Igor the Elder, referred to in the primary chronicle as a prince. By this time, the chronicle's accounts of governance are considered more reliable. The prince's retinue, or druzina, played a key role in administration, military campaigns, and collecting tribute from subjugated Slavic tribes. Tribute, mostly furs, honey, wax, skins, and slaves, was exported primarily to Byzantium. Proceeds were spent on weapons, luxury goods, and wine. When trade conditions were unsatisfactory, Igor launched a campaign against Constantinople in 941, which failed. A new Rus-Byzantine trade agreement was signed in 944. The primary chronicle reports that Igor's attempts to extract more tribute led to a revolt by the Drevlians, who killed him in 944 or 945. Igor's widow, Olga, avenged his death. She implemented a tax reform that organized the collection of tribute and established administrative centers, known as pagasti. Olga also established diplomatic relations with the German Emperor, the Pope, and Byzantium, and converted to Christianity. In 964, she handed the Kyiv Principality to her son, Sviatoslav, a warlike pagan who spent most of his life on military campaigns. He subjugated the Vyatiki, the Yas, and the Cossacks, and destroyed the Khazar Khaganate, a powerful state of the Khazars to the east. Sviatoslav waged successful campaigns against the Bulgars in Byzantium and even attempted to move the capital to Pereyaslavice. However, in 971, he was besieged at the fortress of Dorostal and had to return conquered lands to Kyiv. On his way back, he was killed by the Pecheneg, in collusion with the emperor. After Sviatoslav's death, his state was divided among his three sons, Yerepok, Oleg, and Vladimir, leading to the first internal conflict, from which Vladimir emerged as the victor. During the reign of Vladimir the Great, 978 to 1015, Rus expanded significantly through conquest and incorporation of Red Ruthenia, Transcarpathia, and Chersonesus. As a result, Kyivan Rus became the largest state in Europe, with a population exceeding 5 million people and a territory of approximately 800,000 square kilometers. The socio-economic structure of the state did not differ significantly from that of other European countries of the time. Its foundation was a subsistence economy, communal land ownership, slash-and-burn agriculture, and livestock farming. Vladimir carried out a reform of local governance by abolishing tribal autonomies and appointing his own governors. In 988, Vladimir officially adopted Christianity from Byzantium. He ordered the baptism of the people of Kyiv in the Pechena River, built the first stone church, the Church of the Tithes, and introduced the statute on church courts and tithes. Unlike earlier attempts by Olga and Askold, this reform affected broad segments of the population and became a decisive turning point in the subsequent history of the Ukrainian lands. Vladimir also implemented administrative, monetary, and military reforms. He appointed governors and his sons to major cities, minted his own gold and silver coins, and granted frontier lands to loyal vassals in exchange for organizing defense. By his order, a system of defensive earthworks known as the Serpent's Walls was constructed, stretching for nearly 1,000 kilometers. Despite these profound transformations and the strengthening of state institutions, after Vladimir's death Rus entered a period of internal conflict between 1015 and 1019. Victory in the struggle against his brothers was achieved by Yaroslav the Wise, 1019 to 1054, who ruled Rus jointly with his brother Mstislav until 1036. This ruler decisively defeated the Pecheneg, who for a long time had posed a serious threat to Rus. On the site of that victory in Kyiv, he built St. Sophia Cathedral, which still stands today. Between 1037 and 1039, the first chronicle compilation was created, and the earliest book workshops were established. The Kyiv Pechersk Lavra was founded, and Hilarion was elected Metropolitan of Kyiv. A judicial reform was also carried out, introducing the first legal code of Rus, Ruska Pravda. In the south, Yaroslav annexed the lands of Prussia, in the west, several territories of the Polish kingdom. Yaroslav the Wise widely employed dynastic marriage diplomacy, actively marrying his daughters to European rulers. From the mid-10th century until 1036, the Pecheneg were the ruling elite of the Ukrainian steppe. They fought wars with the Khazars and the Turks, and also maintained active trade and military relations with Kyivan Rus and Byzantium. Kyivan Rus purchased cattle, sheep, and horses from the Pecheneg, while Chersonesus Taurika acquired wax and hides. For Rus, the Pecheneg served as intermediaries in trade with Asia and as guarantors of security along international trade routes. Relations with early Rus were initially allied. In particular, Igor Rurikovich concluded a treaty with the Pecheneg, and in 944, a campaign against Byzantium took place with their participation. From that point, relations between the two peoples were friendly. Rus paid the Pecheneg for passage through their territories, and the Pecheneg became participants in Rus military campaigns. This situation changed during the Balkan Wars of Sviatoslav the Brave, when he stopped paying the former allies. This, together with the growing power of Sviatoslav, allowed Byzantium to sow discord in Rus-Pecheneg relations. From that moment on, despite periods of truce, relations never fully normalized, and recurring wars weakened both Rus and Pechenegia. The population of Pechenegia was diverse. The core of the nomads consisted of a Bulgar substratum, divided among Pecheneg clans. There were also Slavic agricultural communities and Alans. The Pecheneg elite used the Persian language. Following steppe tradition, the Pecheneg divided their lands into two wings along the Dnipro River. The senior wing was on the left bank and was ruled by a Khagan. The Khagan's headquarters and the place of the general council were located in Porasha. Each wing consisted of 5 hordes, which were divided into 40 clans. Each clan and horde was governed by an elder or bek, who combined secular and religious authority. Extraordinary decisions were made at general assemblies and councils of elders. In terms of religion, the Pecheneg were pagans. In 1007, Bruno of Korfurt visited Kyivan Rus, met with Vladimir Sviatoslavich, and with his participation baptized part of the Pecheneg and ordained a bishop for them. After that, around 1010, Islamic missionaries converted a large part of the Pecheneg to Islam. The Pecheneg attack on Kyiv in 1036 ended in a crushing defeat. Under pressure from other nomadic groups, the Turks and the Burundii, most Pecheneg migrated westward toward the Danube, while some entered the service of Rus princes. Some of the newly arrived nomads, together with the Kovi, also recognized the suzerainty of Rus, settled in Porasha, and guarded its southern frontier. Over time, their union became known as the Black Klobeks. After the Mongol invasion in the 13th century, part of the Black Klobeks became integrated into the Ukrainian ethnos, while others migrated and joined the horde. The Cumans appeared in the Ukrainian steppes in the 11th century. Their self-name was Kipchaks, while Greek sources referred to them as Cumans. After defeating the Pecheneg in alliance with Byzantium, the Cumans organized the local nomadic population into clans. During this period, the Cuman language spread widely across the steppe. At the same time, merchants in the region were predominantly of Persian, Armenian, and Jewish origin. Slavic farming communities were also present along the rivers, the so-called Brodniki. A significant part of the population consisted of Alans. The religion of the Cumans was paganism. Rituals were conducted by shamans, known as kams, whose functions could also be performed by tribal leaders. The cult of ancestors found expression in the construction of special stone sanctuaries on the tops of burial mounds and in the installation of stone sculptures, the so-called Cuman stone statues, which symbolized the deceased. A large number of these monuments have been recorded in Ukraine, especially in the Donetsk, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia regions. The Cumans believed in an afterlife and that a person buried would attain a higher social status there than in life. From the second half of the 12th century, Christianity began to spread among the Cumans, and Islam also penetrated the Cuman steppes. The economic foundation of Cumania was nomadic pastoralism, as well as trade. It was during the Cuman period that camels began to be bred in Ukraine. Fishing and hunting also played a noticeable role. To provide pasture for their herds, the Cumans migrated northward in summer, closer to the forest steppe, and moved southward in winter, toward the sea coast, an area known as Locomoria. They built winter camps where fodder was stored for flocks and herds. In addition to these camps, there were also towns that retained self-government in exchange for paying tribute. Examples of such towns include Shurukin, Azak, Yalta, Subdia, Sugrov, and Balin. Some historians also classify Ltava as a Cuman town. Nearby in the steppe, settlements of the Brodniki also existed, such as Adamak, Burhunk, and Protalk. Cumania was composed of clans, also known as kurans. Each clan consisted of several families that managed their households independently but shared common pastures and lands, called a kosh. Clans united into hordes. Among the total number of clans, noble ones stood out, led by beks, while the leaders of common clans were called atamans. There was also a division into two wings, Black Cumania and White Cumania. Black Cumania was the senior wing. It was located around the Seversky Donets and Don rivers and included the Pomorian, Donets, Lower Don, Lower Volga, and Precaucasian hordes. The leading clans were Turturoba and Alberliu. Its capital was the city of Shurukin, which is often identified with the modern city of Chuiv. Initially, the Turturoba dominated, later replaced by the Alberliu. White Cumania was located around the Dnipro River and in Crimea. The strongest clan of this wing was Kyoba. Its capital was the city of Matluka, which, according to some hypotheses, was located on the Malakna River. At first, interaction between the Cumans and Kyivan Rus took the form of military confrontation. However, after the marriage of Vladimir Monomakh to the daughter of the Cuman Khan Ipa, relations became mutually beneficial. The elites of the Cumans and the Rus intermingled, often acting as a single force and supporting each other in military campaigns, including the Battle of the Kalka River. The Cumans became one of the contributors to the ethnogenesis of Ukrainians, as well as of other indigenous peoples of Ukraine, Crimean Tatars, Karaites, and Krimchaks. The death of Yaroslav the Wise in 1054 ushered in a new period of internecine conflict among his sons, Izyaslav, Sviatoslav, and Vsevolod. Regular princely congresses became a permanent practice due to the need to develop legislation, resulting in the 1072 legal document known as the Pravda of the Yaroslaviki. In 1097, Vladimir Monomakh convened a Congress of Princes in Lubeck, where a new patrimonial principle of succession to princely thrones was introduced, effectively formalizing feudal fragmentation. For a time, this process was halted by Vladimir Monomakh, who was invited to the throne by the people of Kiev after the uprising of 1113. During his reign, the first bridge across the Dnipro River was built. He also authored an addendum to Rus law known as the Statute. Through skillful military and diplomatic actions, he controlled about two-thirds of the state once ruled by Yaroslav and actively defended the land from Cuman, Polovtsian, incursions. After the death of Mstislav, Vladimir Monomakh's eldest son, in 1132, Rus definitively lost its unity. By the mid-12th century, around 15 major uppunage principalities had formed within the territory of the former unified state, each living essentially an independent political life while only nominally recognizing the seniority of the Grand Prince of Kiev. On the territory of modern Ukraine, these included the Kiev, Chernihiv, Pereyaslav, Volhynian, and Galician principalities. In later chronicles, this very period, the year 1187, marks the first recorded use of the toponym Ukraine. An active struggle for power began. According to historian Stepan Tomaszewski, between 1146 and 1246 rulers in Kiev changed 47 times, 24 princes ruled there, often returning to the throne multiple times, and 35 reigns lasted less than a year each. The main opposing forces in the Ukrainian lands were the Rus dynasties, the Severian Alovici, the Volhynian Mstislavici, and the Galician Rostislavici, as well as Polovtsian clans, the Donets Alberlievs, the Azov Turcherviks, and the Dnieper region Kyivichi. In 1222, new nomadic forces entered the Pontic steppe, the warlike Mongols, who inflicted a crushing defeat on the Cumans. The Cumans, bound by dynastic ties to the Rus princes, appealed to them for help. A combined Rus-Cuman force marched into the steppe. However, in 1223, at the Battle of the Kalka River, internal disputes among the princes and the lack of unified command led to a catastrophic defeat. After this victory, the Mongols withdrew eastward for 14 years. In the late 1230s, the Mongols returned with far greater forces under the leadership of Bata Khan. In 1240, they captured Kiev and devastated other principalities. Following Bata's invasion, the Cuman elite was almost completely destroyed. Most Beys were killed or subjugated, while the broader steppe population fell under the rule of the horde. Part of the nomadic population migrated to other lands. The invasion marked a decisive turning point in the history of the Ukrainian lands. In the Kiev and Pereyaslav regions, princely rule ceased altogether, and these territories came under direct administration by horde officials. In other lands, local princes fell into heavy dependence on the Golden Horde, becoming tributaries of the Khan. Some Rus groups, notably the Brodniks and the Bolakivians, voluntarily entered into alliance with the Mongols. The princes of the Galicia-Volhynia Principality were also forced to recognize Mongol overlordship, though under comparatively milder terms. The Galician Principality separated from Kiev in 1097 and reached its greatest power during the reign of Yaroslav Osmomysl, 1153 to 1187. Under his rule, Galicia became a strong state. Cities were developed, campaigns were fought against the Cumans, and successful wars were waged against Hungary and Poland. At its height, the principality extended to the Danube and the Black Sea. Galicia and Volhynia existed as separate principalities until 1199, when the Volhynian prince Roman Mstislavic seized Halik and created the unified Galician, Volhynian Principality. In 1203, he also captured Kiev, which had already lost much of its former importance after being devastated in 1169 by Andrei Bogolyubsky. By that time, Roman had built a powerful state. Pope Innocent III offered him the title of King of Rus in exchange for converting to Catholicism, but Roman refused. After his death during a campaign in Poland, the state was dominated by an oligarchic boyar elite from 1205 to 1238. In 1238, Roman's son Daniel of Galicia returned from exile in Hungary, captured Halik, and became the undisputed ruler. After the Mongol campaigns into Central Europe, he decisively defeated the boyar opposition at the Battle of Yaroslav in 1245. Having received a charter, Yarlik, from the Mongols confirming his rule, Daniel restored fortresses, built the walls of Kremnitz and Home, and moved his capital to the latter. Once his position was secured, he launched a war against the Mongols in 1252. Seeking allies, in 1253 at Drohiczyn he accepted a royal crown from Pope Innocent IV, who proclaimed a crusade against the Mongols, one that never materialized. As a result, Daniel barred Catholic missionaries from his lands and broke relations with the papal curia. He also took part in the struggle for the Austrian throne and led campaigns against Bohemia, Poland, Lithuania, and the lands of the Ottvingians. However, in 1258 he submitted to Mongol authority, renewed his charter to rule, and dismantled the fortifications of his cities. After Daniel's death in 1264, the throne passed to his son Levi of Galicia, 1264 to 1301. He moved the capital to the newly founded Lviv, fought Hungary, annexing Mukachevo, and Poland, capturing the Lublin region. After Lev's death, his son Uri of Galicia, 1301 to 1308, came to power. He lost the Lublin region, transferred the capital to Volodymyr Volynskyi, styled himself King of Rus, Prince of Volhynia, entered into an alliance with the Teutonic Order against other Slavic principalities, and in 1303 founded the Orthodox Galician metropolis. In 1325, the Polish Prince Bolesław Jerzy II was invited to the throne. During his reign, the active Polonization of Ukrainian lands began. In 1340, after Yuri II was poisoned by dissatisfied boyars, the unified Galician, Volhynian state ceased to exist. In this video, I talked about the indigenous peoples who inhabited the territory of modern Ukraine in ancient times, and gave an overall overview of Kyivan Rus. Subscribe to the channel, and in the next video you'll learn more in detail about Kyivan Rus, its formation, growth, and golden age, its great princes and their reigns, and much more. Thank you for watching until the end. See you next time.